Welcome back to another episode of The Next Step, the podcast where we share real stories of resilience, adaptation, and triumph over life's toughest challenges. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, a bilateral amputee, and today we have an incredible guest whose journey is nothing short of inspirational. Scott Lowell is a healthcare professional with a master's degree in healthcare administration and over 25 years of experience in laboratory science. He has led large teams, conducted domestic and global operations, and spent his career helping others. But in May of 2022, Scott's life took an unexpected turn when he was hit by a drug driver while riding his motorcycle. What followed was a journey filled with hardship, resilience, and ultimately transformation. Today, we'll talk about Scott's experience from the accident to his recovery, the challenges of limb loss, and the decisions he had to make along the way, and how he has adapted to his new reality. Scott, I'm glad to have you here. Welcome to The Next Step.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for having me. Also wanted to thank you for your efforts in starting this podcast. I think any opportunity we can have to share our stories and information, I think it'll be helpful for other amputees as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I know when I heard stories from other people, it really helped me through my recovery and understanding what would happen next, sort of thing. And I also didn't feel like I wanted to be alone all the time. So hearing other stories really helps. Hey, listen, I know that you got a passion for motorcycles, and when did you start riding them?
Yeah, I certainly did have a passion, and it was actually about 10 years ago. I was living in San Antonio at the time. I was in the military, and one of my good friends had taken this required rider safety course. The military requires it before you can actually start riding a motorcycle.
Right?
It's a 2-day course. So he'd taken it, and he was telling me how fun it was, and so I took that and I decided I was going to register myself for the class. And I think it was probably like a 3 or 4 month wait before I could get in. And didn't really think much about it. But then, the class came and it's a full 2-day course. And at the end of it, I just had fallen in love with writing from that point. It was just,
Yeah.
um, a thrill. It was exciting.
Yeah,
But
it's quite the feeling, right?
yeah.
I'm 58 now. It's been a long time since I rode a bike, but I used to ride like dirt bikes. And
Uh-huh.
well, I remember one time we were racing across the field, and I jumped up over a hill, and the front wheel fell off, and I came right down on the forks and went tumbling. I think that's probably about the last time I rode a bike.
Yeah.
So listen, you're well educated. You've had a really successful career for 25 years in healthcare and working with laboratory science, I believe. And
Mhm.
you've managed teams all over the U.S. and globally. Married with 2 kids, life is going great. You're enjoying life. Things are normal, right? And then in
Yeah.
May of 2022, everything changed. And that's when you were riding your motorcycle and a drug driver, not drunk, but drug
Mhm.
driver hit you. Can you take me back to May 22nd and just, if you can remember that day, just tell me what was kind of like leading up to that crash.
Yeah, I mean, it was I had generally would take one day out of the weekend, the nicer of the day, and kind of use that as a writing day, and I just go out for a couple hours and come back, and this day was like any other normal day. It was going to be a beautiful day, and it was a Sunday. I just got up, jumped in the shower like I normally do. I relaxed with a cup of coffee, and I headed out.
Yeah, and so you're driving down the road and things are normal and you're enjoying the ride and an SUV is starts to come towards you and you try to avoid it. You swerve, but the SUV swerves with you and follows you right until it hits you, right? What's going through your mind at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it was really panic. just what was happening. I had already been out on the road for a couple of hours and decided I was going to start heading home. And I was just on this, small country road, traffic in each direction, and this Lexus SUV just starts swerving into my lane. So I'm kind of going to the right side of the lane to try to avoid it. And he overcorrects, I think is probably the best way to put it,
Right.
and and then turns further into my lane, and I end up impacting the front passenger side wheel of that SUV, and that was the beginning.
That must have been, horrifying. I can't even imagine. Listen, and during that time, you actually EMTs arrive, and later found out that you actually had a connection with the EMT through your family. What was that all about, and how'd you learn that?
Yeah, so it was my uncle's brother, so my mother's brother-in-law.
Okay,
His name's Harold, and so his brother Lee was a part-time paramedic, and he worked, 1 or 2 days a week, basically. And he was one of the two EMTs that responded on the ambulance. And he told my uncle about it because it was such a bad crash, but at that time he didn't know the connection. So
right.
then, of course, my uncle knew and said, "Oh, I wonder if that was Scott." And in fact, it was. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, it's just
But
very
he
strange.
didn't recognize you. He didn't know you at the time, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, we,
But
we didn't.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was going to say we didn't really know each other, but I would say probably within that first couple days, it was realized, that I was the one involved in the accident and he was the EMT.
Yeah,
And I didn't learn about it till much later, just because I was so out of it while I was in the hospital.
right.
But I ended up running into him, Lee, at my uncle's. It was an anniversary slash birthday celebration or barbecue. And
Okay.
so I got to have a long talk with him then.
Yeah. And this must be months after, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then there was a nurse on scene that, kind of jumped into action really fast and helped stop the bleeding while you were on the in the accident there. And what was that whole intervention like, and why was it so critical at that point?
Yeah. So when I had the impact, I had several life-threatening injuries. Basically, the right side of my body was just destroyed. So I was bleeding out on the middle of this road, and this nurse stops. She happened to have a tourniquet, so she applied a tourniquet at my upper thigh to try to stop the bleeding. And the EMT Lee had told me later that if she had not done that, I would have certainly died before they even got there due to the amount of blood that I was losing.
Right.
So this woman, this nurse, is a mystery still.
Yeah.
She was listed. She was interviewed by the police as a witness to the accident, but she didn't have any information to really share because she didn't see it. But she arrived shortly after. And so I know her name. I have tried to find her on social media, and she's just not there. And I really just want to thank her for what she did.
Oh, maybe she's listening today on the podcast here, and you'll be able to find her.
Hey, that'd be awesome.
That would be awesome, right?
Yeah,
So you get rushed to the hospital, and you see a vascular doctor at that point. And the vascular doctor says to you, "We're gonna save your leg, right?" And
yeah.
you have this hope to actually keep your leg. You didn't think that you were going to lose it at that time, correct?
Yeah, so I was pretty much in a coma from the really from the ambulance, just from the medications they were pushing.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really learn about this until I reviewed my medical records well after the fact. But yes, so the trauma surgeons had consulted vascular surgeons, and just to determine if they felt my leg was salvageable, which they did. And because of this, I ended up with four extensive surgeries to repair everything, starting with my broken hip and pelvis, my femur, which was broken in six places, and then everything else below. I also found it interesting that the trauma team documented my leg from the knee and below as being obliterated. That
Is
was
that
the
what how they
term.
described it?
Yeah, that's how they described it in my medical records. And so, the fact that the vascular determined even with that it was still salvageable is, something I continue to question actually. That decision, had they decided at that time that, an amputation would be the best thing, I certainly wouldn't have had all of those other procedures. Possibly my hospital stay would have been shorter. And I think definitely my recovery would have been faster.
Yeah, it's funny because when you go into something like this, it's always good to ask for two or three opinions, right? Don't just listen
Mm,
to the first doctor. I know when I went in, I had three different ortho doctors come in and say, yeah, we have to take your leg.
mm,
And I was a bit stubborn. I said, no, I don't want to take my leg. I want to try and save it. And I went to a vascular surgeon. The vascular surgeon, well, why would we take your leg, Kevin? Well, we can take just your foot. And so that's what they did. And it gave me an extra 2 years, Scott, to
mm,
actually walk around. It never did heal properly, and I ended up losing my leg. But
wow.
those 2 years were pretty special to me, right?
Mm,
Listen, you spent 40 days in the hospital, followed by 5 months of really intense recovery, right? And
yeah.
we'll talk a little bit about the recovery and the rehabilitation here in a moment. But what was really hard about those days when you think back?
Yeah, well, my hospital stay was really interesting because I, had so many procedures and I was in the ICU. There's this condition called ICU delirium as you're, coming out of the operations and all those drugs, and it just, I had that condition, and so I wasn't thinking straight. I was didn't realize anything like, was it day, was it morning? I just had no idea of anything.
Right.
But I did spend ten days in the ICU and then 20 days in a different step down inpatient unit, just like a normal inpatient unit. And then probably my last 10 days in the hospital was in an inpatient rehab unit. And so I was actually very fit at the time of the accident. I was running, I was weightlifting 5 days a week pretty consistently. And it amazed me how quickly my body deconditioned
Yeah.
because I couldn't get out of bed for anything. And so all of that time, a couple of days before I went to the inpatient rehab unit, the nurse and a physical therapist decided to try to have me sit up in bed. And that simple, act of sitting up, I couldn't do. I just was laid in the hospital bed. And so it took the physical therapist and a nurse sort of pushing my back up
Yeah.
uh, to try to get me in that position. And yeah, that was just really shocking that I was starting everything from scratch.
Yeah, it's when you're in the hospital, your mind kind of goes, you don't know where you are, and then
Yeah.
it's surprising how you lose all your muscle and strength, right?
Yeah.
Especially, I think that's why they want to get you up and walking when you're in the hospital as much as possible, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So listen, a nurse is changing your bandage every couple days, I believe, and you're dealing with some kind of infection, right? Um,
Yes.
is that true? Like you had an infection, and what was the mental state going through that period with the infection and changing your bandage and whatnot in the hospital?
Yeah, well, in some ways, I was actually happy to have been discharged to home care.
What was home
So,
care? Okay.
happy to be home after all of that time. But at the same time, I was thinking that perhaps I wasn't ready to be home because I still had so many open wounds, both from the accident and from the surgeries. And so, yeah, a home nurse would come by every 3 days, and it was the infection was MRSA, which everybody knows is a super bug.
Yeah.
And I had the infection in my ankle, that sort of outside of the ankle bone there, uh, and it was pretty bad. And the nurse called the orthopedic doctor who was treating me at the time to tell him, and he told her, "Well, just keep doing the things I'm telling you to do, and pretty much don't worry about it." They had me on a course of antibiotics, which didn't work, and so they put me on just another couple of weeks of that same antibiotic. And it was really strange that they'd never cultured the wound to see what was
Right.
causing the infection. And it wasn't until after um, that nurse called the doctor, and she advised me, because the doctor said, just keep doing what you're doing. But she advised me, if I were you, I would go to the ER. So I ended up going to the ER. I ended up waiting over 8 hours in the waiting room just because they were so busy. And
Yeah.
I guess I didn't have a serious enough reason to be moved up. So after that 8 hours, it was disappointing because I see the doctor and he's telling me there's really nothing we can do for you. Your case is too complicated. It really needs to be handled by that orthopedic practice. And so
Right.
he called the practice and spoke with the doctor on call. I get in the next day, and I didn't see my normal doctor because he was off that day or on vacation or something. I did see another doctor, and it was only then that it was cultured. And he ended up also removing all of the eschar, which is really just like scabs, just these large areas of scabs. And he pulled all of those off, which was really rather painful, actually.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then it just continued from there.
Yeah, and the sooner they get to a wound, before it gets infected, the better, right? And once it gets infected, it's really hard to clear up a wound. The one thing I found, Scott, in this, like with my wounds over the years, um, a lot of doctors and ER nurses don't really understand wound care because they don't
Mm,
deal with it, right? They deal with like an emergency, hey, I've got to get this bullet out or whatever it might be. But they don't really understand how important it is to actually keep the wound clean and looked after, right? So
hmm
listen, you're thinking that there should be better progress at this point, and it's just not healing the way it should be. You've got this wound, and so you start to consider other options. What made you think of a specialist in Boston, of all places? Because you're where?
Yeah, so my orthopedic surgeon, I just started questioning it after, never having received a culture before then. And his he had this odd sort of infection um, product where he would just literally mix sugar and iodine, and then
Okay.
he'd kind of spread it on. It was like a paste almost, and then cover it up. And that was his solution to wound care, basically. He had strong opinions about a lot of things, including wound care and pain management. And he didn't feel that the wound clinic would actually be helpful. He didn't think highly of it. At one point, he called it just a revenue generating area for the hospital.
Oh boy.
But my primary care, he was with me really from before. He was my primary care all the way through my healing. And he ended up referring me to the wound care at another hospital. It was closer to home. And that was really life-changing because they were doing the steps needed to start that process. And at the same time, I didn't mention, but I was in home care for 5 months, for about five
5 months.
months. And yeah, so during that time, it was just, uh, it was, it was almost like a declining I don't want to say mental state, but just mood and attitude. It was just becoming very
Yeah.
like, oh, this is my life now. And, um, you know, and the physical therapists and the nurse, they were hinting at it. Like, if you had an amputation, you would probably be doing better now. And in fact, so this physician assistant that was treating me at the wound care clinic, she thought the same, and she felt that you need to be seeking like higher level care, and that she would put in a referral to me, for me, I should say, in Boston, and it was actually a plastic surgeon that she referred me to,
Okay.
and she ended up referring me to the orthopedic surgeon in Boston, and the plastics and ortho work together for amputations,
Right. Right.
and I
Do you
was.
know why they work together? I've never understood why they have a plastic surgeon come in.
Well, I think I can't really say for sure, but I think they do the internal sort of muscle and nerve repair
Okay.
once the amputations happen.
Okay.
I believe plastics does that piece.
Okay.
Um,
So,
and
so they take a look at you and they say, geez, I think you need to have an above the knee amputation, right? And
yeah.
um, uh, what went through your mind at that point? I mean, that's like a moment in time, right? That just your
Hmm.
heart jumps.
Yeah. Yeah. And frankly, at that point, I was grateful because I just couldn't see myself progressing forward in my current state with my leg.
Yeah.
And so I was happy that they were willing to do that now.
Yeah, especially with the infection and whatnot, because there is some pain to that, and
Yes.
you feel sick. It's poisoning your body and whatnot. So sometimes the amputation is like a better route, right? What
Mm-hmm.
made you decide to have the amputation? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I was pushing for,
Yeah.
really, just because I've been getting all these hints from these professionals that, your progress would be a lot better if. So I was thankful again that they agreed. And in addition to the infections and the wounds, my knee was locked straight. And it was due to all the heterotopic ossification, which is just extra bone growth that happens in traumatic situations.
Oh, I see.
And so because of that, I couldn't bend my knee, and I'm 6'1". So, trying to sit normally in a chair, trying to sit normally in a vehicle, like I couldn't sit in the front seat with my legs
Possible.
straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to always sit in the back seat, sideways. I had to sit sideways across the bench seat. Even, just to kind of talk about it even more, like my leg was always swollen,
Right.
in addition to the wounds not healing. And so I couldn't even fit into a shoe. My sister brought me to a shoe store, and I tried many sizes, and nothing would fit on my foot. So
So
I was
you're
using,
walking in barefoot then, or?
well, I was using one of those like Velcro type
Right.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
shoes that you would wear, or that they would give you after a foot surgery, I guess. So
Right.
I had to wear one of those.
Right. So what's
Uh,
life like with, at that point when you have the above the knee amputation? Like, how did you adjust?
yeah, I mean, for me it was easy just because from the accident to when I had the amputation, it was 9 months. I was dragging this dead weight around for 9 months. In fact, my amputation surgery was on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh,
So I'm coming up on 2 years actually
that was just
for
coming up.
my
Yeah.
amputation. Yeah, tomorrow is 2 years. But well, once it happened, it was really life-changing for me because I finally saw like a light at the end of this tunnel, and that I didn't see before then.
But it must have been really hard because you're an active guy, you ride motorcycles, you play sports and whatnot. And now you can't do any of that. So you said that you were kind of glad, but I bet there was something going through your mind that you were saying like, what will I ever get to do again? Like, well, how is my life changing?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, certainly. I think there were still some periods of like, well, this is it now, This
yeah,
is,
yeah,
there's no going back. And it wasn't like I was depressed or anything. It was just, thinking about it more deeply.
yeah,
But it's still to this day, I'm happy that I had made the decision that I had the right people on my medical team to finally
right.
get there.
Right. Well, you're a pretty optimistic and positive guy from what I've learned, knowing you. Listen, you start to regain. How did you regain your mobility and independence? Uh, what what kind of things did you do to get up and around and walking around and things like that afterwards?
Yeah, I know a wheelchair is often part of any amputee's life, but my wife insisted on buying me one, and I insisted on keeping it in the garage.
Good for
Uh,
you.
yeah, so from the start, I just used crutches everywhere, all the time, until I got my prosthetic.
Right.
And then that was just another moment in time that was, all right, here's this other great thing that's going to further improve my life.
Yeah. How did you feel when you first walked on the prosthetic?
Well, it was actually kind of frustrating. The first prosthetic I have, I still have it actually. It had some microprocessor knee and a microprocessor ankle, and I didn't understand how to like work it. And
Right.
so oftentimes I'm taking a step and I'm bringing my prosthetic leg forward, and the knee is not bending. It's like locked. So then I end up dragging it. And I just couldn't understand why that was happening. So I was frustrated. But then I started to learn. I started to figure out it's because you're not putting enough weight on it. Because at that time I'm walking with two crutches.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so it just became so much easier to walk with my prosthetic than to walk with crutches.
Yeah. Going back to the wheelchair, I just kind of thought about this. Um, you put it in the garage. That's really interesting. I had a friend not when I went through all this and I was sitting in my wheelchair, I was like, I don't know. I might be in a wheelchair the rest of my life. I said, I really don't know. And he said, well, you know what, Kevin? He said, if you don't get out of the wheelchair and walk, you'll never get out of the wheelchair and walk, you know? And it
Yeah.
hit me in that moment. It's like, yeah, if you don't try and work at it, it takes a lot of work and you just have to buckle down and do the work.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah, go
uh,
ahead.
the body needs to move, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And the more moving you do, the better off you're going to be.
yeah. And the brain has to learn that there's no leg there anymore as well.
Mhm.
So that's a whole challenge in itself. Yeah, Scott, you just said that a couple minutes ago there that you had an incredible support system, and that's what got you through. And that's your wife and your two sons. What did that mean to you, and how did they support you through your journey?
Yeah, I mean, it was so important to have a support system. I would probably be in a different place if I didn't have them. And my wife, she has become a super wife. Just making sure that I have everything I need, and
Right,
just is really so great to me. I did have my two sons as well. My youngest was in college in Texas at the time. He flew up while I was in the hospital, but then had to leave. I didn't really see him until Christmas that year. And my oldest is more local, so he's stopped by the hospital many times. My mother, she was there every day, and just continues to be part of my recovery there. And my sister, my older sister, she's a nurse, and she lives about 2.5 hours away. But she made the trip up several times while I was in the hospital, and many times since. So
Wow.
I've just had this whole group of family that just were looking after me.
Yeah, you've got a really loving family by the sounds of it. And you know, we often overlook what they go through. It's a shock to them as well, right? And it can be a little bit challenging from a mental, emotional perspective. Um,
Yeah.
Same with you. Like it's not just a physical challenge here. There's an emotional and a mental component to this. And you know, what do you think your biggest mental hurdles were going through this process?
Yeah, I think, having the amputation was just the start of it. For that 9 month period, I was just in this like it was a holding pattern almost, right? I couldn't do anything. I couldn't move well. And then, the amputation happened and since then I've just sort of been like you said, I'm optimistic. I'm always looking forward to the next thing. Like
Yeah.
what is my next challenge going to be? And that's just been my life since the amputation.
Yeah, it was really interesting. You said earlier, like, no, Kev, I didn't get depressed or down really. You just kept moving forward, right? And that's that. I find that really intriguing. I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of amputees, and you know, they go through processes or like the different times where they're, you know, very, you know, they go to a dark place. Let's put it that way, right? And
Yeah.
hard to lift yourself out of that. But any advice of how to stay positive? Like
Yeah, everybody's situation is different, right? Different challenges, different scenarios, different
yeah,
reasons for amputations, and so it's hard to provide advice. I try to be active in social media in the amputee groups,
right.
and try to provide information where I can. And recently, one of the questions was about whether or not a husband should have an amputation because, an ankle, multiple surgeries, whatever. And, I am not qualified to give
Yeah,
advice on such a life-changing thing, right?
yeah,
But for me and my situation, not having the amputation after the accident or, during my recovery in the accident was almost um, it almost it just made me more thankful to be able to have the amputation and to
right.
be able to move forward because like I said it was a holding pattern. I just was stuck in life. I couldn't do anything. I had returned to work in November following the accident and that was just another great moment for me that happened before the amputation but I love my job. I love the work that I do. I love the people that I work with. And so that was really great to be able to return to work and see them and start working with them again full time.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I think for me to provide advice to somebody that is facing a similar challenge or a similar situation, like, ask yourself, uh, what has your quality of life been leading up to the
yeah,
decision that you're trying to make now?
right,
And then looking at it forward, if you decide to not do the amputation, you can expect that same quality of life.
right.
And if you make the decision to do the amputation and just think forward, then ask yourself would I be better off
Better.
as an amputee than having more surgeries and having, it not work and whatever joint be not functional? And probably most of the time, people would come to the conclusion that, yeah, my quality of life has not been good. I can't do these things that I used to do, and I could possibly do them after an amputation. So,
Yeah, yeah. You know, I really resonates with me. Some of the people I've talked to, including myself, um, I kept getting infections, Scott, and I felt sick all the time, and you know, like my body felt poisoned all the time. I had no energy. I was sleeping a lot, And had I thought about it again, like if I were to go back again, I think I would have taken my leg a lot sooner than trying
Mm.
those 2 years to save it. The other thing that came out, what I found interesting, what you just said is your perspective and your gratefulness. When you go through something like this, your perspective of life and how grateful you are. I mean, you almost lost your life in ICU, right? So you have to have a different perspective of life after that experience.
Yeah, that's very true. And I didn't really hit on that, but yeah, Lee, the EMT, later said that he didn't think I was going to make it.
Right,
But his job is to patch me up as best he can and get me to the hospital and have them continue that care. And he usually doesn't see or hear anything after that. And so, yeah, I almost lost my life, and that's probably part of my optimism, is
right.
because every day from that point forward is a bonus now.
Yeah, you're grateful, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So listen, you've had to relearn some things. How has your daily life changed, and what have you really had to relearn since the amputation?
Yeah, relearning everything, everything. Just learning how to ambulate, right? Even post, actually after the hospital, just learning to ambulate with this dead limb that I had, and then amputation, and then learning to how to live with an amputation, finally getting the prosthetic 3 months later,
Yeah,
and then, probably relearning to walk is the biggest thing. And frankly, 2 years later, I'm still figuring it out,
right.
you know, still learning how to walk. And in fact, in December, I hired a coach. She's a doctor of physical therapy. Her name's Jackie Garcia, and she does amazing work. I have become so much stronger and more confident since having her sort of prescribe all of these different exercises that I need to be doing to walk better. And I feel like I walk normally now, as normal as I can. And that's the outward thing that people see. They see me walking normally, and they're like, "Oh, well, okay, that's cool," but they don't realize how much work went into that.
Yeah. And it's still a lot of work, right? It takes so
It
much
still is.
energy. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, I like to set goals myself. So a lot when I was trying to learn how to walk, I said to myself, I'm going to walk around the house a little bit for the next 40 minutes and I'm not going to sit down. And then the next day it might have been 2 hours. And then the next day it was like, okay, I'm going to go out to the mailbox and back. And
Mm.
I just set those little goals all the time. Were there any small victories that you can think of that kept you pushing forward?
Yeah. So, as we talk about learning and relearning things, having an amputation, you're having to learn all of these very different things that you never even thought of before. And for example, after I got my prosthetic, I had quickly, like everybody, lost a lot of volume in my limb. And so I needed to get a better fitting socket. Well, there was a period of about a year or so where I was very gradually gaining weight, and it became more and more painful to walk.
Yeah.
And I didn't really make the connection until far too late. I'm like, oh, I think I'm so much pain because my socket is getting smaller. And so that really like stalled my progress because I just couldn't. It was so much work and energy to go to work that when I got home, I needed to take my limb off because I was in so much pain. And so I couldn't really do anything after that. But once I realized what was going on, I ended up getting my new socket, and that happened in this last December, actually. And so since then, I'm like, okay, I've got this socket, everything fits, feels good. I'm ready to start work. And so that's when I reached out to Jackie. this coach,
Coach, yeah.
and she got me started on this path. And so now I'm consistently doing these workouts 5 days a week that are all geared towards me and helping me walk better.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
That's
this life is good now, but those little steps that you talk about, so one or two of those five workouts, she always has like a 10-minute walk to end the routine there, that workout routine.
right.
And so I was doing 10 minutes at first, and I was like, well, shoot, why don't I, just go further? And I have this little the neighborhood I live in, it's kind of being developed right now, but it's kind of like a T of a road, kind
Okay.
of going this way, and then a connecting street that goes this way, and both of those are dead end, right? Both of those roads are dead end, and the opposite end comes out on a very busy road that
Okay.
I wouldn't feel comfortable walking on. So this little route here is less than a mile if I did it. So the baby steps were kind of doing, okay, let me just walk this street. That was good. Next week I'm going to go to this other street.
Yeah.
And now I'm up to a mile, and a mile does not sound like a lot, but I can walk a mile on these hilly roads,
Yeah.
and
Look,
it just that has built confidence.
a lot of people just think you put your prosthetics on and let's go, right?
Mhm.
Doesn't work that way. It's hard. It's hard work.
Yeah, it is.
Listen, is there if you were to bump into somebody that's about to have an amputation, is there anything that you would say to them at that point, looking back from your journey? What would you say to somebody?
I think just be as knowledgeable as you can going into it, understand the procedures, really getting involved in those social media amputee groups, and just monitor those for a while, because people are asking the questions that you're going to have.
Yeah.
And those groups are really great about providing great responses that are really valuable. And so that's just a way of helping to educate yourself. I think one of the things I wished I'd uh, known more or studied more was the types of prosthetics that were available. And I knew the basics, like mechanical leg versus microprocessor and that, but I didn't really understand the benefits of this one versus that one. And I wish I'd done that work sooner. I just went with the recommendation of my prosthetist, and I'm getting ready to swap this leg out for a new leg, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think there's so many different prosthetics out there, and it's hard to know. And when you're new to this, you do take the recommendation because you're new, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't even know how to buy a wheelchair, to be honest with you. Like, what do you look
yeah.
for in a wheelchair, right? Yeah, you do have to do your homework, that's for sure. And the other thing, like I always give advice to people going through this is that I try to let them know that they're not alone and that there's
Mm,
a lot of people. There's 5 point some million in the US alone, that 5.1, 5.2, something like that, of limb loss, people with limb loss. And in Canada here, it's pushing up around 600,000 here. That's a lot of people. And we don't recognize that when we have our limbs. You don't recognize that until you lose your limb. But it's really important to not just do your homework, but also to connect with other people and hear their stories. So I really appreciate your time today, Scott, and sharing your story. It's you've been through so much. It's a testament of your strength and your perseverance, and being able to adapt to life. So thanks again for sharing your story and all your struggles.
yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin.